Good day, as we say, but it's kind of tough topic that we're meeting over. Allow me to say at the outset that there is no employer whom I'm representing in Slovakia who would say something against the need to consolidate public finance. That, I think, is something that we all can agree on. Something we cannot, however, agree upon with the government and its proposed measures is how the consolidation is to take place. Here I'd like to take the liberty of stating that we are unpleasantly surprised that the consolidation is supposed to be based only on increasing the income side of public finance. And the government is not very willing to go into austerity measures. So I think from the side of the state, there's still much room on savings, not on people though. The wastage could be stopped to a great extent, not to go ahead with inefficient projects and investments which do not have economic sense. As in 2008, our companies and companies worldwide were facing a situation when the revenues were falling and the profit margins were dropping. None of us went any other way but through savings and austerity measures to save those companies. And I think states and governments in Europe are in the same situation right now. By going to a further indebtedness is the road to hell, really. It's time now to optimize the running and economies of the state so it be long-term stable. Today, much is being said about the need to launch or kickstart the economy through economic growth. Yes, indeed, one can only agree with that. But where we differ in opinions as opposed to the government is how to kickstart the economic growth. We're convinced that it should be done through investments of the private sector. And we are convinced of that because as soon as investments which are supposed to kickstart economic growth are done by the state, usually are megalomaniac investments, inefficient investments, often based on irrational decisions, and thus the basic principle is not observed. That is the long-term sustainability of the economic growth. I've nothing against building highways, but building highways can only employ people for a couple of years. But I'm asking, what afterwards? The highways will not exist here for those supposed to use them. So, in fact, if we do not provide infrastructure-based economic growth for business, the highways will be used by no one. There will be no businesses to use them. So, here I'd like to say that the government should not be approaching the private sector and taking away its resources to put them into some kind of funds to be used for kickstarting economic growth. They should leave the money in the private sector and attract foreign investors for them to kickstart the Slovak economy themselves. We have a beautiful example from a few years ago when a reform were made in 2003 and 4, and Slovakia has become a leader of economic growth in Europe, which had lasted several years afterwards. And even today, we are still not so bad off or badly off as a result. Now let me be a little more specific now, because I was expected to define measures we're not happy about and those which are acceptable to the employers. So next two slides I took the liberty of summarizing those systemic measures. So not to be accused of being unconstructive critics, let's list those measures which are, though painful, but we consider them still to be systemic. And from the viewpoint of the current situation of tight public finance, we still consider them as acceptable. So it's first of all elimination of tax evasion. That is something which has to be acceptable at any time, whether it's growth or crisis. Simply, taxes should not only be paid by those who are responsible, but by the setting of the tax system should enable the broadest possible basis of taxpayers thus creating opportunity to lower tax rates in a country. As a result, we know VAT collection, we are the second worst, just after Greece. It's a very poor second place, in fact. Another measure I can relate to, it's removing exceptions from payment of taxes and contributions. There were a great many already removed in the past. It's been made quite efficient, the current system, but there's still much room for improvement in this regard, because that will enable the basis from which taxes and contributions are paid. Another measure I consider as a systemic one is to abolish social benefits for high-income citizens. We see no reason for those who don't really need it to be recipients from the social welfare system of any benefits. That is why the system needs to be set so that only those in the need would be covered. Like a family benefit. I don't know. I have no reason. I see no reason if it wasn't the case in the past. If the entitlement to family benefit would be to anyone without any difference or any tests of their assets or income situation. Similar situation with the tax bonus, which again we would accept its limitation for high income employees. Concerning the area of taxes and contributions, which are quite sensitive. This area is quite sensitive. Much is being said about introducing taxes on dividend. That we think is one of the non-systemic measures. But we could discuss introducing contributions from dividends. It was in fact prepared last year in the tax and contribution reform, and employers did declare that is something acceptable, of this way of burdening the capital, so that the dividend income would be made contributable. So from an annual account, let's say, it would burden those who have no other incomes other than dividend-based income. So since in Slovakia, I think it's going to stay that way, we have a ceiling to the cost of dividend contribution that should not have any cause, any dramatic burden upon the business, and we would receive income from dividend into a balanced position to any other income. I think in terms of social system that is acceptable. If I don't want to say the word just or fair, it would actually put a lid on one of the holes that we currently see as leaking. No regular dividend are being paid, and thus no income into the treasury. Also imaginable to us is the introduction of contributions from contract-based work, that is for short-term work. The situation will be long-term unsustainable. Currently we have 800,000 of such employees in Slovakia who are paying the minimum taxes and minimum contributions. These are not only those on a short-term employment contract, but also those self-employed, whose majority is paying minimum of taxes and contributions. Now, the vast majority in Slovakia, so we could accept as employers the part of this group of employees be burdened with taxes, even though it's going to be also reflected on the employer, because much of the income or much of the payroll tax is paid by the employer. But we still deem it as a systemic measure. And the last one I'd like to touch upon, last measure, is the adjustment of taxes and contribution for the self-employed. The scissors are currently too widely open. If with certain income you would compare social and tax cost of a self-employed person, and in the same position employ this person to as a civil servant, the tax burden is more than 100% to the detriment of the employee. I don't doubt the fact that self-employed have a different position in the society. They are not covered by the labor contract. They have to take care of themselves concerning their costs, expenses. On the other hand, it's not sustainable over the long term for the scissors, which are opening up these costs for one and other type of employees or work, would be so widely apart. The fact as a proof to that is that besides the statistics available to the finance or labor ministries, there is also more than 80% of self-employed pay minimum salary base contributions. So there is in this part of businesses or entrepreneurs a great amount of optimization of the accounting. I consider this something, if legislation allows for it, of course every entrepreneur would use the opportunity available, but for the stability of the system, that is something which creates a great problem, because that's why a certain narrowing down of those scissors of tax and contribution system would be necessary and thus acceptable by us as a result. This brings me now to the other type of measures which we consider as completely damaging to Slovak economy. I suppose I should be faster. I have less points here also. So first of all is the abolition of flat tax. It's a measure, it's been a system proven to be efficient in Slovakia, very effective. And it's been a great symbol of Slovak economy Slovakia could boast with when trying to attract foreign investors to Slovakia. This symbol, the flat tax, is not abolished because it has economic justification behind it. We are abolishing it because it's a political commitment. Purely. It has no economic grounds whatsoever. I'm not saying about the discussion that there will be an increased rate of income tax. I'm talking about abolishing flat tax, that we're going to split up entrepreneurs into those who make more to those who make less, and simply the entire system will be distorted as a result. As the second fairly major problem, we consider, already mentioned, abolishment or non-prohibition of employing for short-term contracts. Government is proposing for this to be completely abolished. So any employee working for an employer only based on labor code regulated labor contract. I'd like to see what about those sectors such as agriculture? How are they going to deal with seasonal work, for instance? Whether they're actually the very foundation of their business is the season work is really a defining driving factor, necessity of short-term employment contracts. Because there is no seeding during winter, there is no harvesting during winter. Winter is, in the agricultural sector, it's quiet. So the costs will be dramatically increased as a result. This is not the only sector, but one which would be affected the most. We claim the following. Yes, indeed, when we say yes to introducing contributions to short-term labor contracts, but we don't want this option to be completely abolished as an institute. Slovak economy should retain that institute because it's dramatically necessary for the labor market and for the employment. Another problem is to increase ceilings to make contributions. The government says that the calculation base should be grown by 5, a multiple of 5. Currently it's multiple of 4. Currently those various ceilings of various calculation bases are at varied levels. Currently it's a multiple of 3 in one area, but to put it up to multiple of 4, we consider as a systemic solution something we consider as totally bad. We'll make it multiple of 5, because that would actually place a great burden on those highly qualified staff and employees who employers will look for avenues how to avoid this type of making this high contributions, and a legitimate way of doing it is companies be incorporated elsewhere other than in Slovakia. IT sector being one of them. We have 40,000 employees in IT sector who pay more on taxes than the entire automotive industry, because they employ highly qualified staff. And we are going after these highly qualified staff by this new setting of the new rates for contributions. And the last measure is the tax on dividend. I did show on the previous slide that we have no problem with contributions introduced from dividend, but we do have a problem with taxing dividends, because it would be a double taxation, in fact, and the effect would be that it'd be chasing the capital outside of Slovakia. Thank you for your attention.